Well, basically the problem pretty much right across northern Victoria and a large part of southern Australia in general is your shallow water table. So this area was cleared back in the gold mining days in the 1850s and the 1860s. In the mid-1950s that started to appear, expanded very, very rapidly to the time we get to the late 1970s. There's about 1,000 hectares of land that's affected in this one site. The problem here is this is a very old landscape. It's part of something that goes back to early tertiary times. That means it's around 60-70 million years old, and it's accumulated an awful lot of salt in that time. And any water that comes out of those hills down to here, by the time it gets down to here, it's around 2/3 of the salinity of seawater. And it's basically seawater in concentration. Once that water rises to within 1.5 metres of the soil surface, the surface soil acts like a big blotting paper and just soaks the stuff up and it evaporates off. And once that happens, it kills all the vegetation. There's nothing to hold the soil together anymore, so it's blown away and exposes the saline subsoil underneath, the clay underneath, and that's what you're standing on. So, you know, that's, in a nutshell, that's the process. Perhaps Andy, you could fill us in on how it happened, when it happened.
When it happened, when it first started to happen here was in the mid-1950s. My uncle used to own this part of the land, and they sowed a wheat crop in May of 1954-55, and it was a very wet winter. Soon after he had sown the crop, he found there's patches, bare patches in the crop, and he went and inspected it and dug it up, and the seed was just all soggy. It hadn't germinated because at that stage he didn't know what would cause. He took it into the lands department. There was a name then, and they said you've got a salinity problem out here. That's when it all started. From then on, he couldn't crop this land where we're standing now, and this area here was virtually useless for grazing and cropping. In the wet winter, the water table would be at ground level. You couldn't walk or drive or anything through here. There's photos of it, just a slush. In the summer, it was just a dust pile. The sheep would camp there because the water table was only 1 metre or 2 metres down. It was nice and cool. I'd prefer to camp out here than I would under the tree because it was cooler. 2004, Northern United Forestry Group came along and were wanting to do an experiment through the, having funding, government. I agreed. Identified the areas where we would say the salt bush, which was the worst affected area, which was through here. Better soil out there was the trees. The big working bee was held here. We got this done in 3 or 4 days. All the salt bush and all the trees. The gods looked down on us and gave us 40 mil or 160 points of rain. And they never looked back. We probably had a 95% strike in survival rate as it walks through. So this area here where the salt bush is, we put sheep in here now, whereas one time you wouldn't run any sheep at all. Our land, we have a lot of lucerne, and this area here has allowed us to spell the lucerne for 3 or 4 weeks and then put sheep back on it. The lambs do a lot better on, they gain more weight on the lucerne, but in here that we found out they're healthier. And we take them out of here and finish them off on the lucerne before we sell them. So last year I was able to run 400 lambs in here, and this year we've got just short those ewes because after shooting, I can wander through the trees, get a cold snap that's good shelter for them. So it's it's really improved the productivity of this land through here with the salt bush, the trees. They just eat the grasses through the trees as you'll wander through. You'll see where they've been eating the vegetation through there.
So you can say, and I can just read it off the tape. So you're saying 2.75 there at the moment. So given that this is a metre above the surface, the water table is actually at 1.75 metres at the moment. That's because it's been pretty dry here over the last month, and here we're finding the water table's really following quite closely the rainfall. So water tables have actually dropped considerably with the drought up through there. We haven't had any recharge up there to that groundwater system for the last 12 years. But what we have been finding is that when we do get rainfall, we're actually getting this system being topped up by the rainfall on this particular site, so it's actually keeping the salinity problem going. Compulsory that at least a few of you taste this water.
You're going to drink it.
It's been in the bay. That's what I said.
No, it's not that bad. I was not as bad as like the bay water.
All right. I'll catch you later, Mal.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah. That's all right. There was another acacia called Acacia pendula, which is again sort of indigenous to the northern plains but more New South Wales, and then beyond that the sugar gum, which is Eucalyptus cladocalyx. And the thing about Eucalyptus cladocalyx is that it's not supposed to be very salt tolerant at all, and yet it's doing remarkably well on this site, and Phil will talk about the results we've got from his monitoring. Okay. When we started here first, although this wasn't as bad as that land we just left in terms of salinity, it still had a water table within 1.5 to 2 metres. When we actually planted the trees, the water table was sitting at around 1.6 metres. About 18 months ago, I started to notice that the water table under the plantation was separating out, was becoming lower than the adjacent land, or any of the adjacent land. And the first couple of months I sort of looked at that pretty closely, because there's been very few instances, if any, of anybody actually managing to lower a water table where the groundwater salinity was as high as this. Now the interesting thing about all of that was the first half of last year, well, for the first few months of it at least, we were in drought, severe drought. So the water table was actually lowering when there was no other water available for these trees. And so I guess as a hydrogeologist, I came back and said, well, guys, there aren't any other options. These trees have to be using some of this water. Sent that off to people around Australia, and they came back and asked me all the sorts of cynical questions that I would have asked them, having given them the same results. Most of those people have been here since and had a look at the data and the numbers, and they all walk away scratching their head a little bit. But nevertheless, it's happening. So the water table here now is at 4.25 metres. I've just measured that, compared with 1.75 back over the other side. So there's in fact a big groundwater depression, saucer-shaped depression, that now sits underneath the plantation. And we can track that with this bore, and one back further over, and another one under the remnant vegetation to the north of us here.